This is an explanation for the movie The Girl Who Got Away. I'm the angry guy, and I'm going to tell you like it is. Please watch The Girl Who Got Away, an excellent confusing movie before watching this explanation. We watched this film in the dark, and we actually got scared a couple times. Maybe didn't really know what was going on sometime, but maybe that helped also. Gary Bailey was the head officer that night when Elizabeth Caulfield chased 10-year-old Christina out in the road in front of a pickup. But Christina's real name is Katie. When living in hell with Elizabeth Caulfield's young Katie's best friend was Christina. At that time, young Katie felt her best friend was everything she wasn't, brave and smart. Katie felt in her mind she was responsible for Christina's death. To honor her best friend, she took Christina's name. That's why she told the paramedic her name was Christina that night when she almost got ran over by a pickup. After that night, Katie escaped from Elizabeth Caulfield. She had no options. Her parents were gone, so the state put her in a foster home until she was 17. As a young adult, Katie left for a while, went to school, but kept coming back to Messina because she felt guilty not protecting the other little girls living at Elizabeth Caulfield's shack of a house. Katie thought the other girls in the house didn't get a chance to leave. Plus, Katie feels she will forget who she is if she left Messina. Eventually, Katie became an elementary school teacher in the town of Messina. Older and more mature now, Katie went to the office, Child and Family Services, to see Andrew Stewart, the foster care director, to try to adopt Lisa Spencer, Willow McCarthy. Andrew asked Katie how Tom felt about the move. She tells Andrew her and Tom are moving to a beautiful home with a great school system for Lisa. Andrew tells Katie Lisa has been in trouble with the police and in and out of foster homes her entire life. Katie explained to Andrew she wanted to help girls like Lisa with a screwed-up past because it's just like her own. The same day, a tow truck driver, Charlie, Eddie Beveridge, found a wounded U.S. Marshal laying beside her car alongside the road. Quickly, Charlie realized the situation and jumped into the Marshal's car and started to call for help on the officer's car radio. The wounded officer got up and tried to tell Charlie something, but she got shot in the back of the head. With the blood spraying on Charlie's face and seeing Elizabeth Caulfield with a gun pointing right at him, he immediately went into flight mode. The next scene, Katie's remembering the shack of a house she lived in with Elizabeth Caulfield and the other little girls. The memories are so vivid when Caulfield was screaming for Christina. The real Christina and Katie were hiding upstairs in a closet, trying to be quiet. During a birthday and announcement party at Katie's house, Officer Jamie came over to tell her Elizabeth Caulfield has escaped from a wrecked police car. Now Katie is terrified for Lisa's safety, so Katie was abrupt with Lisa while taking her home and not telling her what was going on in her life. By Katie's actions, Lisa thought Katie didn't want to adopt her anymore. Gary Bailey, Ned Van Zandt, the retired sheriff, is now talking to Officer Jamie over the phone and telling him about Elizabeth Caulfield's escape. Sheriff Bailey went on to say Elizabeth was a nurse at one time and took care of babies while their mums got some sleep. She seemed like a normal person, but something different was going on inside of her head. One day she stopped coming to work and dropped out of sight. Sheriff Bailey continued by saying 5 years later, Caulfield kidnapped Katie. Every year after that, one girl would go missing. And every year the girl she took would be a year older than she took the year before. Officer Jamie noted it was strange Katie being the first to be kidnapped by Caulfield, plus Katie lived the longest with Caulfield, and she was the only one who got away. After each killing in the movie, Katie wakes up in the middle of the living room floor covered in dirt, and her hands and feet have been grinded in dirt. One morning, Katie woke up in the middle of the living room floor with mud all over her, and Katie decided to move away. While taking a shower, she looked at a picture of the house she always wanted to and almost convinced herself to move out until she found the gift Lisa, her newly pre-adopted daughter, had given her. With the gift, there was a note reading, "Happy birthday, Mom." Retired Officer Gary Bailey is telling his wife he is looking for clues about Caulfield while watching old tapes he confiscated from Elizabeth Caulfield's house when she held those young girls hostage. To gather more info on Caulfield, Officer Jamie went over to visit the retired sheriff, Gary Bailey. Jamie was surprised to see Amy Bailey, now pregnant, Gary Bailey's daughter. At one time, Jamie and Annie Kruger, liked each other. Back in the day, Jamie followed Amy out of school, NYU, to Messina. Jamie found a job he liked, so he stayed, but her family, the Baileys, had higher aspirations for their daughter. Jamie found out Gary Bailey, the retired sheriff, did not want the FBI involved in the investigation of Caulfield because of all the little girls who were kidnapped and killed by Caulfield was under his watch, and it would bring hard feelings for everyone in the community again, and shame to his family. What retired Sheriff Bailey didn't tell Officer Jamie was he drives by Katie's house once a week and sends her birthday card every year. He tells himself he does that out of guilt because he was supposed to protect Katie and those other little girls from Elizabeth Caulfield. After talking to the retired sheriff, Jamie went to the evidence locker room to find out more clues about the old case dealing with Elizabeth Caulfield. He found a palm recorder tape with the title reading 10 years old. Officer Jamie took the tape to Casey Bell, Abby C. Smith, as an IT expert for analysis because his department has none and would have to send it out. On the tape, Elizabeth Caulfield telling the girl, "Tell him how old you are today." The tape was recorded in Caulfield's house 25 years ago. The little girl on the old palm recorder tape is Katie, who everyone thinks her name is Christina. One reason Katie wakes up filthy in the middle of the living room floor because she sleepwalks. Officer Jamie decided to go to the place where Elizabeth Caulfield used to work years ago. He ended up seeing the HR person, Jean Conley, Deborah Ugger, at the hospital where Caulfield worked as a nurse. Miss Conley worked there when Caulfield was there. Miss Conley fired Caulfield because she was told to do so. The reason given to Miss Conley was to protect the hospital. Miss Conley went on to say Elizabeth Caulfield was having an affair with a married man, and that man wore the same uniform as you, pointing to Officer Jamie. Katie and Lisa, her potential adopted daughter, separated on bad terms, so Katie went to visit foster parent Terry Caldwell, Jerry Cantor, who watches Lisa. Terry was a foster parent to Katie also, and she knows he only fostered kids for the paycheck. Katie remembers Terry drinking at the time while watching her. The suspects are mounting up. One night, checking up on Katie, Officer Jamie found her digging in the backyard with her bare hands without any shoes or socks on. Officer Jamie confronted her the next morning, and after talking to each other, they both went separate ways. Meanwhile, a hunter finds Elizabeth Caulfield dead in the woods. She still had her prison band on her wrist. In a heated conversation, Officer Jamie asked Katie directly, "How in the world does Elizabeth Caulfield knows all the intimate details about your life?" Katie told Officer James, while Elizabeth Caulfield was in prison, she would write to her and tell her everything because she called her mom. All the girls did who lived in that shack of a house. They all called Elizabeth Caulfield Mom. Katie went on to say in her letters she wrote about Tom, the Caldwells, and Terry, the indigent. Katie continued and said she wrote to Elizabeth Caulfield when she was 15 and wrote her letter every month ever since then. Jamie goes, "Why? Why would you do that?" Katie said maybe she wanted to be a good person or she wanted to forgive her. Maybe it was just to have someone to talk to. Katie didn't really know. Afterwards, Casey, the IT expert, called Jamie and told him to come to see something on one of those tapes, the time code on the palm recorder tape with Katie on it. It was November 18, 1998, 1 week before Katie escaped. Supposedly all the other girls were dead at this point. The time code on the tape read 12/31/41/20 and showed a mirror reflection of another girl in the house. While unbeknownst to the officer, Jamie, at the time, the girl in the reflection was the real Christina. Katie was the one being taped. Casey pointed out to the officer, Jamie, the reflection proved there were 6 girls, not 5, living with Elizabeth Caulfield. After a heated conversation with Officer Jamie and hearing some devastating news, Katie went to her house to let out her anger and frustration. After wrecking her dining room, Andrew, the foster care director, showed up at her house. Jeez. Wow. Katie thought he was there for a home inspection to adopt Lisa. But Andrew actually came over to tell Katie he couldn't accept her application to adopt Lisa because he found out when Katie was a teenager, she got arrested for assault. Andrew commented, it didn't matter if you were sleepwalking or not. Andrew continued, plus you beat your roommate with a broom handle so bad she was hospitalized. Katie, still half crazed about finding out Lisa, her potential adopted daughter, was dead. Jamie finds her by the house where she used to live, digging up a body, and it was Christina's body. As a young girl, Katie always wanted to be Christina. So weary about who killed 4 people in the 2 days, Officer Jamie made a decision. It had to be Katie because of what he saw on the tapes Casey showed him. Katie defended herself by saying she didn't kill 4 people in 2 days. Jamie then told her he just found out a couple hours ago Elizabeth Caulfield has been dead for 2 days and was found in the field by a hunter. Katie said, that's impossible. Why would she kill Tom Caldwell's? Katie asked. Who would do this? Officer Jamie said, you have to come with me now. Jamie had Katie in the back of his police car to take her to the police station for questioning when a call came over the radio saying there were multiple murders at the Bailey's house. They drove over there and Jamie told Katie to stay in the car. After a while, Katie couldn't take it anymore. She got out of the car and went into the Bailey's house, and there Katie ran into Elizabeth with the blood-soaked baby crying on the dining room table. Elizabeth told Katie to pick up the perfectly good baby. The baby was Amy Bailey's, the daughter of the retired sheriff. Katie was the serial killer's daughter, who called herself Christina after running away from Caulfield. Katie always wanted to be Christina, her best friend, while living at Caulfield's, a shack of a house. Katie, alias Christina, really belonged in the Caulfield's house because she was the love child of Elizabeth Caulfield and Gary Bailey's, the sheriff. Katie was not the first to be kidnapped. Katie appeared to be kidnapped first, but she was really the illegitimate child between Elizabeth Caulfield and Gary Bailey, who was the sheriff at the time. The real Katie was not the first girl kidnapped. The real Christina was the first to be kidnapped. Remember, Officer Jamie told Casey Bell, his IT expert, they didn't have a crime lab to test anything. They had to send everything off to be analyzed. Officer Jamie was way too busy at the time to check out the body, I guess. If you watched this explanation in its entirety, thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate you viewing and value your comments. Thank you.